I got an ex-friend fired from their job. I remember meeting this person, let's call them Alex, around 2 years before everything fell apart. Back then, we weren't best friends or anything. We clicked enough to hang out, chat, share memes, and even offer each other moral support when life got rough. Alex, from the get-go, was one of those people who somehow managed to maintain a significant online presence. Someone who had a fair number of followers, posted regularly, and got decent engagement. The reasons for their popularity weren't entirely clear to me, but I think they had some creative project or entertaining content that drew people in ear. I recall being mildly impressed, yet never quite starstruck, because I saw them as just a regular person once you peeled away the online persona. Things started going downhill in a single disastrous evening. I'm not going to list out every detail, but basically, it involved an interaction with Alex's romantic partner that crossed boundaries in ways I never saw coming. I had believed everything between the three of us was on normal, comfortable terms, like maybe we were all cool enough to share a joke or two without misunderstanding. But on that night, something happened that really threw me. It wasn't trivial. It left me feeling disrespected, and I felt it required a serious conversation to clear the air. I tried to approach Alex calmly about it, genuinely hoping we could talk it through, figure out what had gone wrong, and come to some kind of understanding. I'd known them 2 years, so I thought that courtesy was the least we owed each other. But the response I got was a tidal wave of anger. It was weird, because up until that day, I'd never seen Alex direct that kind of rage at me. They started saying I was playing the victim and trying to expose them. My jaw dropped, because that was the last thing on my mind. I was only trying to handle the situation privately, friend to friend, hoping for an apology or a moment of accountability. Instead, they shut me down, made it sound like I was orchestrating some dramatic takedown. Then they blocked me across all social media and told me never to speak to them again. My mind reeled with confusion and a growing sense of hurt. After that, I spent a good chunk of time replaying the scenario in my head, trying to figure out what had triggered such an extreme reaction. Gradually, I realized Alex had probably panicked, afraid I'd blow up their reputation among their online following. They had a lot at stake, maybe, but I never planned anything like that. The conflict was more personal, and I wanted a personal resolution. In the days that followed, as I tried to come to terms with it, I began noticing other incidents that, in retrospect, hinted Alex had been a toxic friend for some time. They'd made jokes at my expense, or brushed off my problems while expecting me to listen to theirs, or shown signs of arrogance that I'd overlooked out of loyalty. Even though I was upset, I still had no intention of launching a public crusade. Part of me considered it for half a second. Like, should I talk about it on Twitter or Tumblr or wherever? But I knew I didn't have proof. And even if I did, I hated the idea of stooping to a public spectacle. That's not my style, and it felt petty to fling mud in the digital wind, so I let the idea go. But inside me grew a quiet resentment, a sense that Alex had screwed me over emotionally and was just walking away unscathed. Then I remembered something curious from a while back. Alex had once sold me a used laptop. Actually, they'd bragged about having access to a bunch of old laptops from their workplace, a decent-sized tech company. They'd explained that their job involved disposing of them after they were decommissioned. Instead of properly disposing them, though, they wiped the hard drives, reinstalled an operating system, and sold them for a profit, typically a few $100s each. I'd found it mildly shady, but Alex had pitched it as no big deal. The company doesn't care. They're just going to throw them away anyway. My naive side had gone along with it and purchased one for a decent bargain. At the time, it seemed like a victimless bit of hustle, though I did question it a bit. Now that I was on the outs with Alex, I looked at that situation differently. Their job entrusted them to handle company property responsibly. They were basically stealing and reselling ideas. That's not a trivial matter, especially if the company was decent-sized or had strict policies. Suddenly, I realized this is a real violation. The more I thought about it, the more I recognized it as an opportunity to hold Alex accountable in a way that might genuinely hurt them. A surge of revenge-laced adrenaline coursed through me. Maybe it was petty, but I felt they'd burn me without remorse. If I could find the CEO's email or some high-up manager's contact information, I could share the story. Would that get Alex fired? Possibly. They were definitely crossing a line. So I scoured LinkedIn, found Alex's company, rummaged through staff listings, eventually pinpointing the CEO's official email. I typed up a carefully worded explanation, introduced myself as an ex-customer of a decommissioned laptop, described how I learned that Alex was selling these machines under the table, presumably pocketing the profits. I included approximate times, the knowledge of how they were wiped, mention of how Alex had told me the company officially wanted them disposed of out. I ended the email politely but firmly, clarifying that I didn't want to be complicit in wrongdoing. Then I hit send. My heart was pounding as I realized I was crossing from personal vendetta into real-world consequences. Part of me felt guilty, but the anger overshadowed it. I reasoned that if Alex was truly engaged in wrongdoing, the company deserved to know. Right. For a few weeks, I heard nothing. A small part of me thought maybe they just didn't care or maybe the email got lost. Then one day, an email popped into my inbox from a staff member who worked under the CEO. They asked for more details, wanted to confirm the timeline, any proof or references. I responded with what I could, told them roughly when I'd purchased the laptop, that the transaction was off the books, that Alex had bragged about doing it multiple times. Another silence followed. I wondered if maybe it was all a bust. Then I got a flurry of enraged texts from Alex. They'd blocked me on everything else, but apparently not on standard SMS. The messages were laced with insults, threats, curses. You fucking asshole. You had no right, etc. That was how I learned the company fired them. They ranted about how I was destroying their livelihood, how I was a snake, that I'd ruined their life. I recall them throwing out lines about how they have a family to support or a mortgage to pay. But the truth is, from what I knew, Alex was relatively well off. They bragged often about their side hustles and online following. It wasn't like they were on the edge of poverty, though sure, losing a job is never pleasant. I didn't reply to any of those texts. I felt a rush of satisfaction, though I tried to moderate that by reminding myself that losing a job is a big blow. But they'd been so callous with me. They'd burned me. They'd refused to take accountability. They even tried to manipulate me with some nonsense. So in my mind, it balanced out. If they were truly exploiting the company's resources, that was on them. I basically just pulled the lever that exposed their wrongdoing. I imagined they'd find another job soon enough, but maybe they'd have to scramble or find a place with less pay or fewer perks. Hardly the end of the world. On my side, I felt an odd sense of relief. I'd found a way to get even, or at least demonstrate that you can't trample me and walk away scot-free. I've seen some folks might label that as revenge, which it absolutely is. In my defense, I consider it more whistleblowing than petty vengeance, because they really were stealing from the company. If they'd owned up to their misdeeds or not burned me so harshly, I might never have taken that step. But they forced my hand with their cruelty. So yes, it is revenge, but with an arguably justified dimension. After that, we didn't speak again. They possibly went scorched earth on social media about me. I didn't check. I have them blocked everywhere. Their big online following might have fueled them to rant or expose me, ironically, but I doubt they'd have ground to stand on. They can't publicly say, I got fired for selling stolen company laptops and it's your fault. That would only confirm their own guilt. Though I suspect they just simmered in private or maybe tried to spin it some other way. Meanwhile, I carried on, occasionally smirking to myself when I recall how quickly the company acted once they got the email. Perhaps they'd already suspected laptops were disappearing in shady ways. My tip might have been the final piece of evidence. Sometimes I wonder if I took it too far. Maybe, but the memory of how they dismissed me, refused to have a civil talk, labeling me as manipulative when they themselves were the culprit, that cements my feeling that they deserved some comeuppance. If I'd done nothing, they'd just keep scamming the company, keep bragging about it, keep living with that smug sense of impunity. Knowing they faced a real consequence doesn't keep me up at night. That's the story. A friend turned ex-friend who, after crossing moral lines with me, ended up losing their job because I exposed their illegal side hustle. The entire saga is messy. Friendship, betrayal, blackmail wasn't the route I took, but it was close in theme. A cunning gotcha by emailing the CEO. In the end, it was a twisted attempt at justice, in my view. Maybe not saintly, but definitely effective. If I glean anything from it, it's that we shouldn't ignore red flags from the get-go. In hindsight, a lot of small behaviors hinted at their unethical streak. I only realized it after the big blow-up. And yes, I do feel a modicum of satisfaction that, at the end of the day, their hasty, abrasive treatment of me led to them losing a cushy job, reminding them that actions have consequences.